Welcome to Upside Down Training. Today we are training to exit an inversion. Whether you're in headstand, forearm stand, or handstand, eventually you have to come down. So instead of waiting for it to be a fall, we plan and we strategize and we train for an exit. No matter if you're in a headstand, a forearm stand, or a handstand, what happens when we need an exit strategy is that our center of mass has come beyond in one direction our base of support. Let's look at this in a handstand. If I'm in a handstand, then my hands are my base of support. If I'm up in the handstand and my center of mass goes too far this way, then my base of support can no longer hold. So we have to create an exit strategy. One exit strategy is to walk your base of support to be back underneath your center of mass. So training, walking on your hands is a really great strategy for training how to exit a handstand. Now, if you're back on your hands in a handstand, so you've got your base of support as your two hands, and your center of mass goes so far beyond that you can't catch up to it, then you need to train falling out into a back bend. If you don't like back bends, it's time to start training them. Because if you're going to have an inversion practice, you need a back bend practice as well, because there will be a point where that center of mass goes so far forward of the base of support that you will need to have that as a trained exit strategy. The way that we can absorb shock the best is by spreading out our center of mass, spreading out our weight distribution. So in a back bend, we don't want the deepest back bend. We want to pull our head through, which in turn is going to help make our back bend longer. And we want to land with bent limbs. So you don't want perfectly straight legs either. We want to catch and absorb that shock. Absorb that shock with nice bent joints. So when that center of mass goes too far forward over the base of support, we need to train two things. Walking on our hands to then change the base of support to be back underneath the center of mass, or we need to train falling into a back bend. So we need to train our back bends, and no matter which scenario we're utilizing, our feet come down on the back side, or feet come forward to land in that back bend, we need to make sure that our joints absorb the shock. We don't want them to collapse, but we don't want them to be so straight that it just buckles into our own joint. We want that perfect sort of buoyancy in our scaffolding for shock absorption. Let's take a look at these two scenarios. I'm in a handstand, my weight goes forward of my base of support. I walk it out to get my base of support back under, and then I land. I land with bent limbs for shock absorption. The other scenario, I'm in a handstand, my weight is way too far. Well, then I need to pull my head through, again, land with bent limbs to shock absorb and have a nice spread out back bend to then catch myself. We can train both of these things. You can train, not in this very condensed space I have, but in a more open space, just practicing with the intention of walking on your hands, walking on your hands, walking on your hands, and get really used to that scenario. And then do your back bends. Practice your bridge, practice your camel, eventually taking it into a wheel, eventually taking that wheel and doing that tick-tock back and forth to make sure that no matter the scenario of weight distribution, which side of the body, you can adjust, pulling the head through, pulling the head back to compensate and spread out that weight distribution and land with those nice shock absorbing limbs. So that's the forward scenario. Our center of mass has went too far forward and we need to adjust our base of support. The side scenario is really similar. Again, we can cartwheel, sort of walk out the hands. And how do we train this? We train this with cartwheels. We can also do a really low center of gravity cartwheel to really implement and imprint the scenario of walking out the cartwheel and having those bent limbs for shock absorption. What would that look like? That looks like this. Hand, hand, foot, foot, stay low, bent limbs. Hand, hand, foot, foot, stay low, bent limbs. So training this low center of gravity cartwheel will not only give you that side scenario of exiting an inversion, but it also will get you used to being upside down and understanding where your body is at in time and space, depending on a different weight distribution and a dynamic moving base of support. You'll get more comfortable being upside down and understanding all of the different angles. We start to look through all these different angles and train all these different angles of exiting, and then suddenly it's not so scary. You take away the fear, and then we stop attracting it so much as well. Now, if the weight distribution is pulling you out of the handstand, that's probably your safest scenario. But eventually, we have to stop playing it so safe if we want to get ourselves up into that controlled and steady and stabilized handstand. But in the meantime, your exit strategy is going to be something like this, where you just come back down. Again, the important part with that version of exit strategy is to keep the legs bent and absorb the shock. So we have our side to side, even if you're coming forward, but you need a side cartwheel exit because your weight shifted this way, same thing, we practice that cartwheel. If you come this way, but you can't get your body weight far enough overhead, we land like this. Bent limbs absorb the shock. If our body weight goes too far forward, we have that option of transferring the base of support by walking forward and trying to get that base of support back over the center of mass, or we spread out with slightly bent limbs, pulling that head through, and we land in a back bend. Those are your exit strategies for a handstand. Training to exit Pincha Mayurasana or forearm stand is a little bit different than handstand because we have a fixed base of support. We can't walk out our forearm stand. So we have the easiest exit strategy, which is to come out the way we came in. And the important thing to remember here is to always land with bent limbs. Now, as you come down, you're going to want to counterbalance. Remember, it's all about distributing our weight and our center of mass appropriately over our base of support. So if I'm up in my forearm stand and I'm coming down this way, I don't want to take my head this way too. That doesn't make any sense for weight distribution over base of support. If my legs are coming down this way, bent limbs absorb shock, my head is coming through this way. This makes weight distribution sense. It's the same concept, but opposite for landing in a back bend. Weight distribution has to make sense. So we need to pull the head through, but again, land with shock absorbing limbs. So if I'm landing, if my weight goes too far this way in Pincha, so I'm going to pull into a back bend, it makes no sense to keep my head this way and try to land in a back bend. I want to spread out my weight by pulling my head through this way and then landing with those bent limbs. And I'm not trying to be in my deepest back bend. I'm really trying to spread it out and then absorb shock through bent limbs. Now, lastly, for Pincha, this might sound simple, but it's easy to forget when you're in the moment. Remember that in Pincha Mayurasana, how close you are to headstand. Remember what it takes to do a headstand, that structural support scaffolding, that stability of the arms and the shoulders, which lengthens and protects the head and the neck. So the exit strategy is not to just plummet into a headstand. It's not to just drop the head to the mat, but it's to transport your Pincha softly and securely into a headstand. So remember, if you're here and you just can't quite get it, if you can, just transport softly and safely down into that supported headstand. Remember, we have to apply the security and scaffolding of the arms of the shoulder region to protect the head and the neck, because that is our priority number one. Then you can come down and land with these shock absorbing limbs. Next, we're gonna look at exit strategies for a headstand. And this might change the way that you look at falling out of inversions altogether. Because as we went from handstand and the ability to walk it out, cartwheel, or land in that shock absorbing back bend, you realize you had a lot of space and options. As you went to a forearm stand, our base of support was more fixed, so our options decreased. Also, the space between the ground and our head decreased. We didn't have as much wiggle room. As you come down into a headstand, it gets a little bit tighter, a little more condensed, and the options get a little bit smaller. So if what's holding you back is a fear of falling, then maybe looking at these exit strategies will change the way you look at inversions and make you see or feel a little differently at falling out of a handstand versus falling out of a headstand. The handstand's not as scary because you have more room to work and you have more options, you have more strategies. Now let's take a look at the headstand. Let's look at the tripod headstand. Now remember that as we fall, we want to consider where our base of support is and then our weight distribution. We want to try to counterbalance through our exit that weight distribution over the base of support. So when we're utilizing our easiest strategy, coming out the way we came in and absorbing the shock through stable but buoyant bent limbs, that equals resilience. We also have to take into account the front of the body and that counterbalance, spreading out our weight distribution over the base of support. So in tripod headstand, if we come out that way, buoyancy, bent, but strong, stable landing legs, then we counterbalance with the head coming forward. Now our weight distribution is more evenly distributed over our base of support. So let's speed that up a little bit. Stable, strong, but bent and buoyant limbs. Come down, head comes forward. Now we have a nice spread out weight distribution over the base of support. We do the same thing if we have to land in a back bend, right? We want to spread out the weight. That's why we pull the head through and then those strong but buoyant joints to shock absorb. We don't want a deep back bend, a tight space. We don't want our head to stay pulling forward with the legs. We want to pull the head this way as the legs land that way and spread out the weight distribution. We can do the same thing in a headstand, but you need to put some work and effort into your arms, your base of support. So just the way that we came forward, absorb shock, and then pushed up to weight distribute by putting the head in the opposite direction of the feet, we'll do the same thing if we fall in a back bend. So in that way that you exit into the back bend and we spread out weight distribution, we have a little bit of a push-up action happening as well. So this is what we train. As we come up and we know that we're going to go out backwards, strong, buoyant, bent limbs, push up and land in your back bend. So your head is lifted off the ground and then your weight is distributed as we move the head in the opposite direction of the feet with the base of support in the center. Now for a supported headstand, I'm going to remind you of what I said about Pincha Mayurasana, our forearm stand. Remember how similar the supported headstand and Pincha are. Okay, so when you're here, how close you are to being here, right? So this is one of our exit strategies for forearm stand, but know that it's also the opposite, but same for an exit strategy for supported headstand. So when the weight comes in that direction that we prefer, coming out the way we came in, then we push up and look forward. Our head is in the opposite direction of our feet. We're spreading out our weight distribution over our base of support. Exact same thing for if we fall out in the other direction. Our weight goes too far in the other direction. Same thing. We're going to push into those forearms to lift the head off the ground and pull the head through in the opposite direction of the feet. We still want to think about those stabilized but buoyant joints to absorb shock, but it's the same concept. So let's take a look at that. Headstand, going out backwards, push up and land with those bent limbs. My head went one direction, the opposite direction of my feet to spread out my weight distribution over my base of support. So quick recap. When you're in a handstand, the base of support is the hands. You have more space and wiggle room to have different options for exit strategies. Train to walk on your hands forward. Train to cartwheel in both directions. Train to exit into a back bend. Always land with bent, supported, but buoyant joints to shock absorb. Remember that the point when you land is to land with your weight equally distributed over the base of support. So then we come down to a forearm stand. If you again need to exit into a back bend, land with those strong but buoyant bent joints to shock absorb, pull the head in one direction, the opposite of which way the feet land, to spread out your weight over that base of support. Remember how close you are to a supported headstand. Remember how important it is to use the structure, stability, and scaffolding of the arms and the shoulders to support that headstand. And if you use that as an exit strategy, be aware of lowering into that headstand with that support and control. Train it so that you do it that way. When we are in a headstand, there's going to be a push-up element to get our head off the ground when we are landing. In this way, we can take that base of support and spread out our mass above it. So the head goes in the opposite direction of the feet, whether we're lifting up to land this way or we come out backwards and we pull the head through in the opposite direction of the feet once again. But part of that exit strategy is the push-up element to get the head off the ground, be it landing in that back bend or landing the way we came in. When it comes to supported headstand, all of the same concepts apply. We have our forearm stand there as well to utilize. So remember, just like with forearm stand, how close you are to a forearm stand when you're in a supported headstand, and use that forearm push-up mentality to help you get your head off the ground, to distribute your weight appropriately over your base of support for that exit landing. Train all of these elements, and maybe this has changed the way that you look at doing inversions. The more condensed area, the more limited options. When you're up on your hands, it's not so scary because you have so much wiggle room, room to move, and different ways to train exiting a handstand.